I've been in the space for quite a while, in the retail media space for quite a while, and as we look at how retail media has matured, it can become overwhelming. I've got some new members on my team, and as I talk to them about the space, they're looking at 50 to 100 different retail media networks. Like, how do you really think about that? But as you think about any one given brand, they're not executing across that. They're not even distributed probably in that many retailers. So I think you can look at it in buckets, or what I'm seeing is they're becoming a little bit more faceted and nuanced. And so if you think of the OGs, maybe not the OG of Amazon, but those that have had a retail media network for a long time, those being Walmart or Kroger, Albertsons, Target, they're national retailers. Their offering is starting to mature. It's actually starting to unify a little bit. They used to have disparate sources of different tech stacks, and I think those are becoming to unify. And they're also diversifying some of their solutions. They're moving up the funnel. They're going more to where attention is. So instead of, in past where they thought, all right, well, we're going to build it and then everybody will come here, they're starting to realize that we need to go where attention is. And so really beefing up more of those offsite programmatic partners that you see with like Walmart and the trade desk, Kroger and the trade desk. You've also got some of the media networks that are moving into CTV and making those deals, whether that be with Roku or Disney and those. So going where attention is, and then also going into store. A lot of footfalls are still happening in the store. In fact, the majority for a lot of our clients are in store. And so how are you really connecting those solutions? And so that's where I see, the more mature ones, that's where they're evolving to. And then you really have a secondary tier that are national retailers that maybe they're second mover, taking advantage of that second mover advantage. They sort of sat on the sidelines for a little bit. They let everybody else, jump in. And now they're learning from those either mistakes or they're taking the opportunities, from them. And those are going to be, people like Home Depot, Lowe's with their One Roof network, Dollar General. Well, Dollar General's had a solution for a while. I think they're really coming into their, own now. But then you have Sephora, other categories like Sephora, Ulta, Macy's, Nordstrom's. And so, looking at, they have national footprints, and so they can be big, they can get scale, though dollars will flow to them eventually. But they're really just now starting to build up that media network. And then as you really kind of dip into these, what I think is really going to be interesting is these super regionals. These are retailers that brands are very passionate about, or customers are very passionate about. These are your Publix in Florida or your H-E-Bs out of Texas. These are very loyal shoppers to these retailers. And so how do these super regionals play in this landscape when they don't have quite the scale? What is their solution set? Should it be the same exact solution set as a national retail media or somebody larger? And then maybe funding will be a little tougher for them. So what's realistic? And I get a lot of those questions from some of the super regionals. But one that I'm also finding pretty fascinating, because I come more from a CPG background and in that grocery and mass space, is really the different categories of retailers that are starting to build out a retail media network. Marriott, so like hotels, automotive. I got a request from one of our automotive clients, about retail media, and I thought, I don't even know where to start with this, but then I started realizing the amount of data that they have, the screens that they have in these cars. These are smart cars. And so the amount of customer data, and how can they monetize that to give their own drivers and their families better solutions, serve up better solutions, but also help monetize some of that. And then I think, lastly, are some of these aggregators in retail media. These are like your DoorDashes and your Uber Eats, your Drizzlies. And what you would normally think of that retail media is that's just a QSR play, for your fast food or for your restaurants. But then you're starting to see them add on trips that are coming from C-store or grocery. So, I'm getting my, Wingstop delivered, but it's like I could get, other things delivered, cookie dough from, the convenience store, and I'll bake cookies, for dessert. And so I think the space is interesting, but in order to make it not overwhelming, you sort of have to look at the different maturation of where these retailers are at and kind of help, offer up the solutions in that way.
That's fascinating. You mentioned 150 of these networks out there. That's amazing. I didn't realize there were so many. So how are all these retail media networks being funded?
I think the challenge will be with all of these different retail media networks is in the funding sources. You'll continue to see some of them funded in the same way that they've been funded in the past. At least the majority of their spend will come from, or their funding will come from, e-commerce, from shopper marketing dollars, from sales. Also, we've seen a lot of the funding or funding being requested at the national and the brand level. So as some of these solutions and channels like linear television and print, some of those audiences have become to leak into social and other digital, then you'll see that some of that funding will go. But at some point, that's going to deplete. We can't just take every linear dollar and move it into, retail media. So where else can they come from? And I think it can get a little bit, controversial maybe in this statement, but I think factual. And nobody's wanted to say the word trade, but I have spoken to a number of the retailers as well as our clients that are in their tops of tops and in their JBPs, having these conversations with the retailers to be realistic, to say, look, it made a lot of sense for our trade budget to be XYZ when 100% of our shoppers were coming in store. So slotting fees and, some of that trade spend made a lot of sense. Now, a lot of those shoppers are either digital only, digital first, shopping online, they're omni-channel shoppers. So I need some of that funding to help impact, and influence that shopper when they're in an online way. At Grocery Shop, I was talking to one of the super regionals, in fact, and he flat out said, we understand when we launch this retail media network that 30% probably of the funding for retail media will come from our suppliers' trade budget. So don't blame me. Other people are saying it. So, but we always want it to be, additive. And then I think one of the more controversial ways will definitely be, is the pie going to just grow? Can we get more money? At shows like this one and others, there's always rumblings that the 2024 is going to be the year that the pie gets bigger. And of course, I've heard agencies talk about that. I've heard vendors and I've heard retailers. I've yet to hear a CMO say that they think that's going to happen given maybe market conditions and, and other things. But if we're expected to see the growth that has been, reported on, I don't see where that can just keep rearranging the deck chairs and borrowing, robbing Peter to pay Paul for retail media to continue to grow the way it is. I do think we could have other categories that could help, like non-endemic. That's been one that's talked about a lot. A lot of our retailers come to us at the agency and say, look, you have automotive clients, you have insurance clients, you've got health clients, QSRs. What about, monetizing all of the audience data and doing into your non-endemic clients. And while we have presented those things today, I have not seen the floodgates open for those brands to start utilizing retail media for non-endemic. I think it will come, but today it's not just, the number one funding source is going to be from non-endemic clients. Alcohol, bev alc is really interesting. There's a lot of money in beverage and alcohol brands, and up until recently, a lot of them could not spend across the retail media network for a number of reasons, whether there's rev share agreements or laws or whatever. And I'm not saying that these retail media networks are trying to skirt any of those things, but I think they are opening up the conversations to find out ways to be able to have more of those beverage and alcohol clients across their retail media network. So we sit on the council for the Bev Out Council at Walmart Connect. At Instacart, that's part of our partnership, and I think that we'll make some big strides there. And so those will be some of the dollars that help fund those networks as well.
Well, Jill, we have a few more minutes here. I was hoping you could tell us a bit about what the opportunity is for mid to small retailers, and then maybe just look ahead more broadly what you expect to see in the future.
Yeah, we see a lot of the smaller retailers, I think search can be important for them depending on who they are. If you're a convenience store, search may not make a lot of sense. That might be more offsite. It's also, we've seen in the aggregation where, the Criteos, CitrusAd, Instacart, that might be a good play for them to get in, as their first entrant into the market, because those companies have large audiences and they can, really help you build out your, solutions. In terms of 2024, what do I really see? My crystal ball's failed me a little bit in the last couple of years because I made some predictions that didn't come true. I went all in on voice commerce, and frankly, it really has not really come to fruition in the way that I thought it would. But I'm going to say in-store again. I said this last year, and I was semi-right. I think retailers were starting to test solutions. They were meeting with companies if they didn't have the CapEx. That capital expenditure is a big one. If you're going to build out digital in-store solutions, it's not just flipping a switch. So I realize that it does take some investment to be able to do that. But I've seen some of them begin to do that with whether that be carts, whether that be screens. I think the watch out in that challenge is always going to be how much personalization, so moving from like that connected digital experience that we're okay with its on screen, but then when I get in store, how much personalization feels not just connected but creepy. And then of course you don't want it to be disruptive, you don't want it to be that Times Square. So we want to make sure that in store is in a way that is additive to the experience and can really help and be a solution for that shopper as they're just going about their normal. I think that your phone can be one of those screens. So it's not every screen is going to be treated equal in store either. Your checkout screen may be able to have more personalization. You may know who I am at that point as I, scan my card or whatever that is. The TV wall may be more of an awareness type of thing. You've got in-store radio that's probably not going to be one-to-one, that's not possible. But, you have the cart. I can log in, and then that can become more of a personal one-to-one. So I think they'll be able to find ways to accomplish both that digital connectivity that we're looking for and that personalization and, keep it less of a creepy situation. And then I think lastly, video is going to be a bigger thing in a number of ways. So not just because the retail media solutions are moving into more video from an upper funnel perspective, but even when we look at, online on the retailer site, I think there's more opportunity to have those sites just be more engaging, and when you look at the solutions for social and for CTV, those ad units are already going to be video and they're going to be engaging, and then you sort of drop them off into a site that's less optimal. So, I spent a number of years at one of the retail media networks and I tested video all the time on site because I really wanted it to convert. And at the time, we would do A/B testing and it wasn't, but we weren't living in a digital first, environment at that time. And I think we're going to see video become a bigger piece of the retail media experience, both on site as well as in the solution set.